Alright everyone, welcome back to another Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes video with Fat Phil, and today I want to talk about why I am just so ready to be done with this era of piracy. This was a conversation I was having with a few other content creators where it's just, I'm so ready to be done with pirates. I'm so ready to kind of be out of this, Order 66 raid phase. This era has been one that I think has been pretty divisive. I think a lot of it has to do with a lack of hype around the pirates. I think a large portion of it has to do with the almost increasing of the gaps between the end game player, the late game player, the mid game player, and so on and so forth down the line, that each of those gaps has gotten larger in this era. And I even think to a degree it's a little bit of burnout from just an overabundance of characters to farm. There's a lot of stuff, and the average player really can't keep up now. And while some of these changes that have been put into the game are really good, I think the era in which some of them were released in was probably the wrong era to do it, if I'm being honest. And we'll cover this in a second, right? We'll talk about that a little bit more. With all those things said, I do want to give a huge shout out to my channel members for their continued love and support. If you guys are ever interested, that link is below. Long link to the Discord server. Go check it out. Guys, make sure that you are, if you're a member, make sure you join the Discord. My DMs are open to you guys. You know the drill. Thank you just for, supporting me through good, bad, thick, thin, hot takes, cold takes, everything in between. I truly am, humbled, honored, and amazed at just what this channel has continued to grow to, and I'm so excited to see where we go next. So let's get in here, folks, and let's talk about this kind of ending to piracy era, what could be coming next, and why I'm excited for this just to be over. So I think the biggest reason why I'm just excited for this era of piracy to finally be done, I think the biggest one for me is just, pirates don't really do it for me. They're just not a faction I ever really felt connected to. It felt like one of these things where, and again, I don't have all the answers, so I don't know, but I can tell you that it felt to me like Capital Games was probably struggling to come up with a galactic legend, or let's kind of release pirates, and it's like every single like Atano, Quiggled, Kix, those feel like such reaches for characters that we can add. And then having like even Brutus and Vane, to me those are both reaches, especially when we don't have characters like, where's Cobb Vanth? I'd argue Cobb Vanth deserves to be in this game more than Brutus does. Quiggled and Captain Atano, what are we doing here? Kix, Kix wasn't even in like screen time in this costume, right? He was in the Clone Wars, but like we didn't get that version. We got this pirate version of him that we didn't even know existed. So it's been this era where I think a lot of players felt very disconnected by them. Honestly, much of this era reminds me a lot of when we got Dr. Aphra, where again, Dr. Aphra to me was another great example of a character where players just really didn't connect with her. They didn't really feel like she was a big part of their, because if you don't read the comics, you don't watch that stuff, you don't really know who she is. I didn't know who she was. Even, I've made this case before even that, like Cal Kestis, unless you've played Jedi Fallen Order and Jedi Survivor, which I can tell you I've not played them. So even him as a character, I can respect it and understand he's a part of the Star Wars universe, but you didn't really feel a connection with them. And so it's just one of these things where it's like, I just don't really feel connected with the pirates enough that it's like, I'm super excited for that next one, that it's more so just get them here so I can get Hondo and then start working on the next thing, right? Like, it's just more of like I just want it over with. So just like get me to the finish line, more so than, I'm super excited to see how this plays out. So that's, I think, one reason why I'm excited for this era to kind of be over with. But another reason has just been the divisiveness of it. And by that, I mean, let's kind of start just with the splitting of players, right? This pirate era has divided the player base into that like end game, not just to like whale and, light spender and this kind of spender and this. It's like, no, it's really kind of expanded that gap between the end game and the late game. Because as an end game player, I have the ability, like I said, I'm able to 5-star my pirates, so I was able to participate in these new bonus drops. But like, I have them at relics, because the only thing that was ever keeping me from relicing characters was the fact that they weren't 7-star. Now that that's taken away, I can at least get them to relics and start to participate in some of those other areas that I wasn't able to before. And that's almost for every single pirate that will be the case. I could take Vayne here, and I have plenty of gear to do it. I'm just kind of waiting around because I want to make sure I've got enough for, Mace Windu and Maz Kanata and, everybody else, because I'm not going to need Vayne for right away because I've got, the other guys. But for late game players, this becomes an issue because maybe they can relic maybe 1 or 2 of these characters, but it's a whole brand new faction. It's like Captain Atano by himself is not really that valuable. Brutus and Quiggold and Kix, they're not valuable by themselves. I could maybe see Vayne. I think he is a very good tank, actually. But, none of these characters are really valuable outside of the pirate faction. So it kind of just was like, well, you gave us the ability to relic characters early, but you did it in an era where it's all or nothing. So again, it kind of felt like it divided that player base more, because even your late game players were like, well, maybe I can get one of them, but I need all of them to make a difference. And I think for your mid game players and below, it's like, I don't have the gear for these guys anyway. So even if I could relic, even if I wanted to relic them, I can't, because I don't have the gear to do it. So it kind of, I think, brought to light some of the issues with this era being a whole brand new slew, whole brand new faction that it's not like it's one-off characters, and I would go back to, if you go back to like this time last year where you got Morgan and Great Mothers, could you imagine if back then you got the update for being able to relic characters before they're 7-star? Well, now all of a sudden, this is a far more impactful situation because you would have had those other Night Sisters at relics to kind of take advantage of Morgan and Great Mothers at that point. Even think about your dead boys, right? Your Imperial remnants here. Another great situation where it's like, hey, you know what? I could relic these guys early if I want to and get some solid use out of them before they're 7-star, because they fit into teams that I might have already been investing in. Whereas for the Pirates, you're just like, oh, well, I don't really have anything ready for them, so this is pointless. So, it felt like this was almost the wrong era to do that in. As nice of a change as it was, it almost exacerbated this issue and kind of divided the player base into that sort of caste system where, for us in the end game, it was a really great change. And, we celebrated it as a great change for the game, and it is, but I think it came at a time where players in those earlier sections of the game can't really benefit from it because this stuff isn't helpful to them. And even you think the era preceding this was Jedi Vanguard and the Dark Side Clone Troopers, which Dark Side Clones was a very, very big thing for the community, but a lot of it was contingent on Lord Vader. So obviously some players were like, well, what am I supposed to do with these guys? I don't have Lord Vader, and, the Tarkin team, it's good, but, I'm not willing to go the full length. So I get it. I think this has been an era where I'm just kind of excited to see the end of it to get into, hopefully a new fresh one. I think another reason why this era has been, almost so I'm ready for it to be over is how long we've really known about it, right? That we've known that this era was coming for the longest time. We've known that this era was one where it just was almost too much, right? Where we were like, all right, I can't keep going on like this. We've got to be able to, you've always known what was coming. And so it was like, you got Brutus and we got this character and this character. And you're like, all right, well, the next thing's coming and the next thing's coming. And, it's almost nice to go into this next era not knowing right away. I want to, I've gone back and forth on if I think it's a good thing or a bad thing. And I'm like, you know what? It's kind of a good thing because I can just look forward to the end of this era. Because by the time the Clone Trooper era was kind of ending, we knew what was coming next. And, before the Clone Trooper era was over, we knew we were getting all these other characters to, farm and interact with. Where this one, it's like, all right, you know what? I can finally just breathe. maybe there's something coming, maybe there's not. I don't know. And that not knowing is almost nice. It's almost nice not to look at your roster and be like, all right, I finished my clones. Now I've got to go get, the pirates. And, imagine like you're looking at these pirates and now it's like, oh, here's 6 new characters you're going to have to farm between October, November, and December. So I think there's some aspects there where I'm just like, I'm looking forward to this era being over. But I'm also looking forward to this era being over because it's going to give us the blueprint for what I feel will be their era process moving forward. So just for perspective, the next raid, I know you're like, Phil, we just got Order 66, but remember, the next raid is coming in June or July of next year, right? They said Order 66 would last a year. And this is an important thing to note. The first thing we got for Order 66 was in January, starting with the Bad Batch. That was the first kind of thing that we got in that era, was the Bad Batch. And we said how we felt like this raid, everything was rushed because a lot of stuff was not in the game by the time the raid started. So my question is, does this next era start the teams for the next raid? Because if so, obviously that's great news for the community. But that could also then give you insight, hey, if they're not needed for that next raid, then it gives you, the players, kind of time to reassess and say, okay, what does this mean for me moving forward? How does it interact with the game? Unfortunately, one of the beds that CG has made for themselves, we as a community have decided and kind of recognized that if a team does not offer me a return, the value significantly drops. As good, and Ahsoka's still a good team. I'm not saying that it's, the greatest team ever, but it's still a good team. And many players are looking at this like, I'm not going to farm Ahsoka ever because it doesn't get me anything. There's no economy event, there's no raid application, there's no special territory battle planet. It's just a good team. And you compare that to, say, Leia, who's, arguably better, but has even the Endor escalation economy event. Or Jabba, who isn't quite as good as Ahsoka, but he's got Smuggler's Run too. He's got all the uses in TB. There's specific reasons to have these other characters. With Ahsoka, that doesn't really exist. So if this next era is something that doesn't have raid implications, doesn't have some sort of economy event tied to it, then as a player base, we know that, all right, starting January is new raid prep. And now that gives you a framework to save your resources for, if you follow that frame of logic, right? That then how to spend your resources in order to be as prepared for the raid as possible, knowing, hey, that team that comes out in January, they're going to be the raid team that, the March, April, May, all that stuff. Those are where I want to spend the vast majority of my resources. And December is kind of this time frame to bulk up a little bit, which, I think that could be a very legitimate thing. So I'm kind of excited to see how this next era interacts with what's coming next. Does it give us any indication, any insight as to what's happening, and what kind of communication do they give? Because the game normally does slow down between December and January, which I really hope we get one of those breaks this year, because we've had 6 months straight of characters since Oppo CX2. We've not had a break. It's just been character after character after character. I think this is, Silva will make 12 new marquee units in the past 6 months. It's 2 characters a month. It's a lot, right? That's a lot of characters all at once. And that's not including the legendaries and the conquest units. That's just the marquees. So I'm kind of excited to see how this next era gets here. Hopefully it slows down a little bit, but I think the biggest thing is just getting us out of the pirates, getting us to hopefully an era that's a little bit more fun to interact with as a community. Because I do think what could be really nice with a lot of these changes that have come in, with being able to relic characters before 7-star now, imagine that the next era ties into some of the existing factions that we already have, where you as a player could say, hey, you know what? This next era is related to smugglers. Oh, I've already got Dash Rendar. I've already got, some of these characters built up, now I can look at this new character that CG released and actually interact with it and feel like I'm getting some utility here because I can relic them before they're, 7-star. So again, I think that's kind of where my mind is going with this whole thing of why I'm excited to see Pirates go. I know I kind of rambled a bit there, but I hope this gives you some insight, guys, because I think this has definitely been an era that, again, not well received, and I'm looking forward to the next one. So with that said, folks, like, subscribe, comment down below. Let me know your thoughts. I really appreciate all you guys. Just, let me know how you're thinking. Let me know what you're thinking. And most of all, I love you guys. I don't say that quite enough. And I mean that. Like, without you guys, this channel doesn't exist. That's not just something, that's not some line I throw away. I truly believe that. So thank you guys again. Like, subscribe, comment. If you're still watching, go Birds in the comment section for putting a beat down on the Cowboys. Not really, but hey, W's in the chat for that. Love you all. See you in the next one. Cheers, my friends.